Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar. We are going to be talking about Johnny's strategic farm tonight, and we've titled this webinar, Be Bold, Be Brave and Ask Does My Business Work for Me? My name's Leah Shanks, I'm Ahdb's Knowledge Exchange Manager for the southwest of England, and I'm joined by some colleagues as well as Johnny Haimes, our farmer, and Luppo Diepenbroek, Independent Grassland Consultant this evening. Just before I bring everyone else into the conversation, I just want to go over a few housekeeping slides. So just to start with, You've logged on to this webinar tonight. You can hopefully hear us and you can see us, but your microphones are muted and your cameras are off. So we cannot see you and we cannot hear you, which means if you've got a question to ask us, we'll need you to submit that question, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. We've got 90 minutes tonight, so we can finish at 8:30 if we need to. Probably going to finish a bit earlier than that though, so just be aware. And we will be recording tonight's webinar and it will be uploaded onto YouTube. So if you need to go or if you want to listen back at a later date, it will be uploaded in the coming days or weeks. So how to ask a question. On your screen, you should see a little orange arrow. If you click on that arrow, it should give you a list of drop-down options. And on those options, there should be one that says questions. If you click on that question drop-down, it will give you the option to type your question in. So please just type whatever question you have in at any point this evening and press send. And then I'll be reviewing those throughout the evening, and I'll be asking those questions to our other panelists this evening. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now. Okay, so that should have worked. And I'm going to bring my panelists into the conversation this evening. So first up, we've got Johnny Haimes. Johnny Haimes is our strategic farmer who joined Ahdb's project in 2017. Johnny, I'll leave you there for a second and I'll come back to you because we're going to go into a lot of depth with you in a moment. We've also got Luppo Diepenbroek, who's independent grassland consultant. Luppo, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and say what you do?
Yes, I'm an independent consultant, as you said, and my speciality is grassland and also animal nutrition as well. And my involvement with Johnny is really about improving the grassland management and increase animal performance, which is what we've been looking at. And coupled with that, we've also been helped with David as well, been looking into the costings of the business.
Brilliant. Okay, so that leads us nicely into David Peck. David Peck is a knowledge exchange manager for the farm economics team at Ahdb. David, do you want to just give a bit of a description of what you do day to day?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm working as a KM for the Southwest. So mostly I work on our farm bench program, helping farmers with their looking at the cost of production, working with discussion groups throughout the region.
Brilliant, thank you. Last but not least, we have Becky Miles. Becky is a knowledge exchange manager for the dairy team at Ahdb, and she joins us tonight as well, which is very exciting. Becky, do you want to tell the audience what patch you cover and what you do day to day?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My patch, it runs from Dorset to Kent and sort of up to the M4. Like David, I work with discussion groups. I'm the face-to-face, I'm the point of contact for all the dairy farmers in my patch. I also run a couple of strategic dairy farms as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So the idea for this evening is that we're going to have a bit of an open conversation about Johnny's journey for the last few years. We're not going to do a death by PowerPoint. There's going to be a lot of to and fro between ourselves and also with your questions from the audience. So please submit them at any time. No need to wait until the end. So just before we get started, Johnny, I'm just going to launch a poll for the audience. Right, so can anyone see that on your screen, any of my speakers?
Yes.
Could someone read that out for me, please, and read out the answers, because I can't see it.
I can read that for you. What is the biggest threat to the future of your business? So we'd like you to select one, please. Either loss of BPS, the second choice is consumer demand, the third one is commodity market volatility, fourth one is succession, and the final one is other. So if you'd like to select one of those, we'll give you a few moments to do that. and then hopefully the results will pop up.
Thank you. And if you've selected other, please just pop in the question box what other means to you. I'll just leave that open for maybe 10 more seconds. Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to close that now, and then I will present the results. Becky, can you do that now?
Yes, I can. So a topic close to my heart, succession leads with 40%. And then we have 20% for loss of BPS and also consumer demand. Nobody is concerned about commodity market volatility, and we have 20% for other. So hopefully those that selected other have put their comments in the question box for us.
Yes, I've got a comment in there, and it says loss of land. So that for some person,
yeah.
that is other. Okay. So, there we go. I should have closed that poll now. Yep. Okay, thank you, everyone. So, Johnny, we're going to come to you now. So I'm going to try and take us back to 2017, which was some years ago now, and ask you if you can please provide us a bit of a background to your farm in 2017. So, you know, location probably hasn't changed, has it? But tell us about what enterprises you had, what labour you had, that sort of thing.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So the farm is just outside of Plymouth. It's about 550 acres, and it's split into two blocks basically. We have 220 acres, which is under a higher level stewardship scheme, all in you know, permanent pasture. And then we have the home farm, which is about 5 miles away, which is the 230 acres, and that is in the past been split into about half permanent pasture and half in arable, but now it's all it's all pasture and herbal leys. We're on mostly loamy soils over shillet, so it's quite free draining. We get about 1,000 mil of rain a year. It's just me full time, and then I get contractors in to do a lot of the all the silage making, hedge trimming, that sort of thing, and I have someone part-time to help me when I need it. And basically now we're a beef enterprise, buying in store cattle and finishing store cattle on grass.
And what were you doing in 2017? What cattle did you have then?
Yeah, so 2017 we had a suckler herd, and we were sort of mixed farming really. So we had a suckler herd, and we were taking store cattle to 18 months old and selling them in the livestock market, local livestock market. We had about 200 acres of arable land, which we were contract farming, so someone was sort of helping us with equipment and labour, yeah, and we had the suckler herd, so it was a mix of cows and blonde bulls, and yeah, we were housing cows, we were housing young stock, everything was in over the winter, yeah. So that's sort of what it looked like then.
And was it a family farm, Johnny? Yeah,
so well, my dad moved away in 2014, late 2014-15. So I came back home then, and we were farming sort of in a limited company basically. So he sort of had less involvement as when he went away, and I sort of got more involvement until a point where, you know, he has very little input now.
So back in 2017, can you remember why you originally applied to be a strategic farmer?
Yeah, so I felt I was working quite hard for very little, basically, and I felt like I needed something to change, and I didn't really know what I could change, so I needed someone to help me do that.
And you were successful in your application, and that's where Luppo came in. So since 2017, Luppo has been appointed as Johnny's consultant to facilitate his strategic farm journey. So Johnny, your strategic farm objectives, they were to look at your grassland management, your nutrition and your selection. Can you tell us a bit more about those objectives?
So I think when Luppo first came, he was like, wow, those are quite big, heavy cows. And the cows are sort of, 750 kilo, 800 kilos, some of them probably. So he was like, well, we've got to try and reduce the size of the cows. We were set stocking, so we decided to put in place a rotational grazing system using some electric fencing, putting a few more water troughs and water pipes around the place. We did some soil analysis, soil testing across the farm, and we looked at how basically I could make things easier for myself in terms of labour put in.
Brilliant. Luppo, do you want to give a bit of a description of Johnny's grazing and his system back in 2017? What were your first impressions when you met Johnny and had a look around the farm?
Okay, the impression actually was quite intensive hard work for, as Johnny said, not a lot of return on income, on capital. There was cattle indoors being housed, fed average quality silage, growing average growth rates, a lot of time spent bedding, feeding up, and also, as Johnny said as well, the cows that we had were quite large compared to the the calf output. And when you think that each animal grazes nearly 2.5% of its body weight, if not 3% of its body weight, the larger the animal is, the cow is, the more grass that they would eat just to maintain themselves. And you're still producing in the day a similar type calf. So whilst we sat down, as Johnny discussed, on reducing the overall cow size of the herd and the time it would take to get there, we sort of changed our mind really from that, because we wanted quicker return on our capital really, or our investments. The grazing, as Johnny said, was completely set stocked, which is quite interesting on the HLS land, because we have to ask the landowner for permission, and we've more or less, well, we applied for changing to rotational grazing. They didn't answer the emails back, so we went and started rotational grazing anyway. So if I give you Johnny's cattle, that's okay. Right. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that. Can you enlarge it at all?
It should become larger. I think it's larger on my screen.
We can see it. We can see it.
Okay. So if you look at the type of cows he's got, there's actually in the foreground there, the whitey coloured animal there, that's a Charolais cow, and if you look in front of it, that is actually a blonde. John will probably say it's probably not a blonde bull, but it's a blonde bull, isn't it, John? So that's the type of animals we were breeding. And if you look at the calves there on the right hand side, those calves there, they're decent size, nice square calves. From a calf quality, meat quality point of view, or killing out and grading point of view, those would be the type of animals that you want. But the whole enterprise was really, those cows, each cow would be equivalent to needed 2 or 3 sort of young stock. So we thought if we can go all young stock and not have the cows, we actually probably make a lot more money, because these cows are actually costing. And that's where, by the time we did the costings with David Peck, it actually showed that the suckler cow operation was making a each cow was costing us between 200 and 400 pounds a cow that was a minus figure to keep on the farm, whereas the finisher cattle were just about breaking even. So we're actually over the whole farm business we were losing money really. So we had to change that a bit quicker than just by changing the breed of the cow to reduce the amount of food that's going to be eaten.
David, I'll just bring you in there. Johnny joined the project in September 2017. Do you remember when it was that you did those costings and you realised what Luppo just said then about the costings of the suckler herd?
Yeah, so what we did was because we always have to do costings in 12-month blocks, obviously. So we went back a year and picked up the previous year's figures. And yeah, that was just interesting what Luppo said, was identifying that, yeah, the sucklers were making money, or losing money, but the young stock were actually, yeah, just about breaking even, and that was the case. So we've done costings every year since the changes have started to happen, and that's still working through in a sense, because it takes time. Things don't happen overnight on a farm, as we all know that. So it's been interesting to see how things have evolved and how things have developed. But identifying there's those costs and be able to split out those costs between the two enterprises was quite interesting. It wasn't particularly easy the first time Johnny did it, but now we've got the hang of it together. Then year on year, it's an easier process.
Thank you. I've got a question from the audience. I think it's for you, Johnny. It says, roughly what's the farm's GLUs in the summer and the winter? Oh, I don't know if you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can tell it that. That's the livestock units, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I can give them those figures offhand, but I like, Luppo, you might have them.
So I'm actually looking at the, it's not actually part of our farm bench recording because we're actually relying more on livestock produced per forage hectare. The GLUs would actually be fairly low because, as Johnny said, we have 200 acres worth of permanent pasture, which is in HLS, which we basically can't do anything with or farm with. So we're actually tied a bit in with that. Whereas on the main farm, we can do most stuff, but not on this HLS ground.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know any system that's sort of keeping everything out all year round. And I suppose it would be quite low relative to most others. I like to think that I average about 200 head of sort of 350 kilo animals right through the year. So I'll have a lot more in the spring and then reduce it right down in the autumn.
Are you referring to now your young stock herd that you've got now rather than your sucklers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on then to 2018. So Luppo, what changes did you start making on farm?
Okay, one of the first things we actually did was actually to introduce, starting in the spring, about this time of the year, we started making up paddocks right across the farm. So instead of set stocking where we turned the animals out across the whole area, we actually went in and divided the paddocks up into 2 or 3 day paddocks. So cows would be grazing 2 or 3 days consecutive on the paddock and then move on. And we identified the areas where the fence line had to be, more or less, for the number of cattle we had. We still have we have some permanent fencing, but some temporary fencing just to divide the field up depending on where the water trough is. So that was quite a bit of hard work initially to get all the water troughs in place and the fences in place. But now that's all up and running, it's actually relatively easy to put up fencing, and also being 2 or 3 day paddocks at a time, you can actually work a week ahead if you wanted to and somebody just has to go in every 2 or 3 days to lower the fence down to let the cattle go across the next area. The other thing we did as well is because back home where we took the arable land back into grazing, we had to overseed that and plant that with what we did actually decide to go for, because it came out of arable, we could actually go for a mid-tier herbal ley GS4 mix. So that went into herbal leys, as well as some of the ground we've put some overwintering crop in, because we want to see how overwintering was going to work. So we actually used stubble turnips and rape that year. So there's quite a lot of work was done actually during 2018. There's quite a lot of land taken back from arable into grassland and also into the overwinter forage as well, trying to reduce the overwintering cost, because that's where, on the finishing side, that's where a lot of the big, well, even on sucklers, that's where a lot of the costs are. Grazing is cheap, but overwintering is quite expensive.
I think that's what gave me confidence, really, is because that autumn, that winter of 2017-18, we outwintered the cattle for the first time, store cattle, and compared to what they were doing indoors, they did pretty much the same, and it was a lot cheaper, and they didn't ruin the ground. It was okay. So, and then the cattle looked really well when they went away in the spring. So I was like, well, we can do a bit more to this overwintering, I thought. And that's when we decided to go for the GS4 and plant all the arable land with herbal leys in autumn 2018, spring 2019.
Were you nervous at all when you started out wintering?
I think I was most nervous. Yeah, I don't think I was putting out, because none of the arable land was fenced. I was using polywire. You can see some of it there, and fencing the perimeters with polywire, which I wouldn't like to do it again. I get everything perimeter fenced, because it's not very nice when they do, if you have a wet night and they do get up, it only takes one post to get knocked over and they're all out somewhere.
They look quite well behaved in that picture, but did they get out often, or were they quite good?
They're pretty good once I got the hang of it and I made sure the fences were working properly. It wasn't too bad, but I have actually got everything perimeter fenced now, and I'm a lot happier for it.
And as far as the income stream is concerned, you've had an additional income from the GS4.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really good to me. The mid-tier has been really good because I got everything, almost everything fenced on the mid-tier grant, and then we get paid per hectare for the GS4, and I've got some other options in the mid-tier, which provides quite a good income, considering that I was probably going to do it anyway.
Good.
A question from the audience on how did you establish the herbal leys? Johnny, do you want to answer that first, and then Luppo can fill in any gaps?
Yeah, so it was all in, a lot of it was in barley and wheat, with a block of barley and a block of wheat, and then what I planted in stubble turnips. So the barley and wheat stubble was planted in the autumn 2018, and I just went straight over it with an Einbock, and then I rolled it with the Cambridge rolls. And I think we timed it quite well, because we had a bit of rain afterwards. The herishes the stubbles were quite clean, and we've had a really good establishment. And then I did the same over the stubble turnips. I put a set of discs over it all, just to cut up the remains of the stubble turnips a bit more. But then we still went over with an Einbock and just rolled it in, and it's taken really well.
Yeah, Johnny answered all the questions, really. Yeah, Johnny answered all the questions on that, really, because we were quite lucky that, okay, we didn't quite plan it, but it was the weather within a week of us sort of broadcasting the seed and rolling it in, it actually rained quite significantly, over an inch over that weekend. So that actually helped the establishment of the seed without much cost, really, because that is as cheap as you're ever going to do an overseed. It's just a iron bark broadcast and rolling. You know, you wouldn't get much better than that. But it did, as Johnny said, it did help. If you looked at that picture which I had up here, I'll show it again. But you can actually see behind the behind the cattle there, that's quite a bare bit of soil, which basically most of the fields have come out of the winter looking quite bare. As Johnny said, there probably was a bit of turnips there on the ground that had to be cut up a bit, but the ground was quite clean, and I would say we probably have, you know, 70–80% ground cover of sown species after that, which no, it's not bad going at all.
Luppo, was Johnny's soil type, was that quite receptive to establishing herbal leys?
As Johnny said, it's a loamy soil, free draining. I mean, if anything, my concern at Johnny's would basically mean, which is sometimes nearly half the time when reseeds don't work well, is actually suffering more from drought. Because as I said, we actually had rain coming, quite a significant amount of rain after we established the herbal leys. The herbal leys took off, and there was enough moisture subsequent after the rain event to keep the herbal ley going, because a lot of crops tend to go into the ground and probably with a bit of rain, but not quite enough to keep them going, and they germinate and then they wither away and die away. So yeah, we were on both events, both after the cereal harvest, and that was in August. We had, you know, quite a significant amount of rain and stayed wet, and also from the spring reseed after the stubble turnips and kale, we had a wet event after that as well. So yeah, we were lucky on both accounts, but it could have gone the other way if the weather was not with us. So the soil's free draining, so Johnny, like I said, it'd be quite drought prone, could be drought prone, and it could burn off, but we were really lucky with the weather, with the rain that we had after the seed's gone in.
The second part of that audience question was about, did the bird's foot establish well?
That's bird's foot trefoil.
Yeah.
I don't see a great deal of that in the mix.
No, okay.
You know, I did a bit in the first year, but not so much now. And I think you'll find that, you know, different. So you got, you know, 20, 25 different things in the mix. Some will do better than others.
Yeah, completely agree, Johnny. We did there's a series of 4 herbal leys webinars we did with BGS, so they're available on YouTube if anyone listening wants to get into a lot more detail about herbal leys. But on the establishment side, yeah, it's recommended have quite a wide, generous mix, and you'll find out what thrives on your farm, because it won't be the same for everyone.
Okay, so I've got a note here that another change that was made on farm was to reduce the amount of bought-in cereals or concentrates. Did that happen in 2018 as well?
Well, we had those cattle out in 2018. Yeah, over the winter then of 2018 into 2019, and they were fed just the stubble turnips and some haylage, which I put out. So they weren't getting fed any cake. So in a sense, we did reduce it, but we weren't, like now we're not using any. Then we were feeding the weaned calves with some cake at that stage.
So at this point, were the sucklers becoming profitable for you?
We were talking about this. There was some improvement. But I wouldn't say they were profitable, no.
So what did you do about the size of the cows and the number of calves?
Well, we started looking at I was buying in heifers that were a bit smaller, trying to increase numbers, spread fixed costs, but it wasn't really happening. It wasn't really happening quick enough for me. and it was still a lot of effort and a lot of work going in, from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll just put a disclaimer here that we're not trying to tell anyone not to farm sucklers or have a suckler herd, but for Johnny, it wasn't becoming profitable enough for him. So moving into 2019 then, Johnny, is this when you realized the business wasn't going to be sustainable and you needed to make a bigger change?
I'd always had it sort of niggling me that something more needed to change, and I think that was always sort of at the back of my head. I tried to make it work, but it just wasn't working for me, and I couldn't really see how I could, for me, get the sucklers to work. I think probably that spring I had 2 or 3 cows just die on me in calving for no particular reason, to be honest. And I thought, I'm not having this again. So I sort of made a decision then that yeah, I've got to sell the cows, do something slightly different.
So Luppo, when Johnny told you this, what were your thoughts?
Well, it was every time I met up with Johnny, actually, I kept telling him, for every cow you can keep 3 or 4 young stock. And we knew that the finishing cattle or the weaned calves onwards, we're actually making when I said breaking even, they were actually making a slight profit. That they would actually make more money than we were losing money on the sucklers by a long way. That the weaned calves would never make up. So if we got rid of the sucklers and bought in stores, because part of Johnny's business was actually buying in store calves as well to top up the calves that he had by himself. So we knew that he could do that, and it's just a matter of getting numbers on the ground and getting rid of the.
How did you go about it, Johnny, then? How did you disperse the suckler herd? Did you sell them in one go, or?
Yeah, I sold them in one go in the end. It was I sold them in November 2019, and I advertised them in different places, and I thought I didn't want to, but I thought, I might have to split the cows and the calves. But in the end, they all went to one place, not too far away. The bulls, everything, bulls, calves, cows. So that made it a bit easier, actually.
What were you thinking and how were you feeling when you made this big change?
Yeah, it was a bit sad. It was a bit sad to sell the cows, to be honest. But yeah, I don't miss them enough to have them back.
What about your family then? So when you told them this is what you're planning on doing, was that received well?
I suppose when I mentioned it to my dad, he was sort of, because he's had sucklers for a long time. I wouldn't say he was, yeah, that's a great idea, because I think he probably would have done it if he thought that. But I think looking back now, he can understand why I made the decision, and can see that it's been the right one for me.
Good. I'm going to just pause there and launch another poll. So Becky, if you could do me the honours again and read it out.
Yeah, will do. So the question is, what would stop you from making a change? So the first answer is family or business partners. Second choice is limited financial expertise. Third one is skill set. Fourth one, uncertainty on what lies ahead. And the last one is nothing, will change if needed. So if you'd like to choose one of those, we'll give you a few more seconds.
Thank you. And if there's another option on there that we've not included, feel free to pop that in the question box. Just give that maybe 10 more seconds.
There may be some debate if you're watching with your family. Maybe you don't all agree on what the answer is.
Okay, I'm going to close that now, and I will present those answers. So if you could do me the honours again, please, Becky.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, so 50% say family or business partners, and then we have 17% for limited financial expertise, the same for uncertainty on what lies ahead, and the same for nothing. So we have 0 for skill set, so everyone's pretty happy with and feeling competent. So I don't know if we've got any comments in the question box for the nothing option, the last one.
No questions yet. I would like to ask a question though to you as panelists, whether you're surprised by these answers or that's what you were expecting to see.
It's completely what I would expect to see. It's all down to the people generally, and nobody likes change. We're just like cows, we want the same thing all the time. It's much easier that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Yeah, family and doing it always the same way as we've always done it is a very common theme we hear. And yeah, change is difficult for human beings. We don't like change.
Thank you.
Yeah. So can I just come in? Actually, my experience is even, it's even the person himself, by yourself. If you had decision making by yourself, is you're comfortable in your own space, so you're quite happy where you are, despite the fact you might be making a loss or whatever. You dread to change, and that's why there's people like myself or David there to actually say, look, you can change and don't worry, other people have changed. There's nothing, it's always, there's things better on the other side. You need somebody to help you out with that sometime. So yeah, but it's your own sort of comfort zone, isn't it? That's where people sort of tend to be stuck into. So that's why that's why we're here for. That's why we're doing this as well, to give people the confidence to change.
I've got a question here from the audience, and I think any of our panelists can have a go at answering this. If you were planning a change, what do you think a bank would like to see in order to lend you money?
5-year cash flow.
Yeah. Skill set, competency, that the whole team are on side.
Yeah.
That you've thought it through.
Yeah, I think a partial budget would be useful, because there'll be income foregone, and costs will be incurred in the new system. How that's all going to work through.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so moving on again then. So 2020, 2021. Johnny, can you describe your current system for us?
Yeah, so it's a purely pasture-based system where we don't house anything. I'm buying store cattle at as close to 12 months as I can, but I bought several at 6 months, which are going straight out on grass now, not on stubble turnips, Luppo. And then I rotationally graze them in quite big groups. So I got 2 groups at the moment, one of 140 and one of 220 or 30. Measuring grass, managing the grazing, and then we'll any grass that goes ahead of us or any surplus grass we cut and make round bale silage with. And then in the autumn, we'll do a calculation to say how much stock I've got, what their feed requirements are, and we'll set out the we'll finish our sort of last round of rotational grazing in August for the winter rotation, and then I'll put the bales out through the autumn based on the calculation of feed requirements that we have, and then once the cattle have finished their sort of summer autumn rotations, they'll go on to the winter grazing with the bales, and then I'll move them daily through the bales through the winter, and then the whole cycle start again in the spring.
So everything's outdoors all year round?
Yeah, nothing's housed.
And where are you buying your cattle from?
Local dairy farms. Well, no, I say that I did rear some calves that I bought last year, and then the store cattle has been difficult. The price has been quite high this year, and I got them off various places. A local rearer. I bought 106-month-old sort of Hereford cross animals, and then from the markets I bought several, and then privately I bought another couple of bunches.
Have you got a preferred way of buying?
I'd like to buy good quantities off local rearers, ideally.
Okay.
Where I know where the calves have come from. I know what the cows look like. I know what bulls they're using. I know how the calves have been treated and reared, and what the health status is.
I have a few more questions for you, Johnny, but I wonder, Becky, if we bring you in there and just grab your thoughts on what Johnny's just said.
So Johnny's saying all the right things. I'd add a few more possibly criteria, but definitely visit. If you're going to source from a dairy farm, visit, see how they're being reared, ask questions, see how they're performing, ask for some data. Are they willing to share data on growth rates and nutrition and their colostrum management, because that's really important. Would they be willing for you, if you bought some calves, to then blood test them to check their immunity levels, so you've got proof that they've had the right colostrum and they've got good immunity. Agree with them. Are they going to be vaccinated? How do you and are you going to reflect that in the price you're going to pay, because it's going to benefit you long term? And which vaccinations do you want? Talk about the price you're willing to pay, and maybe if they're going to be a consistent supplier, you get a flat rate, so that helps your cash flow and their cash flow, because there will be peaks and troughs on calf price. But if you've agreed that means you can put some certainty into your cash flow, and it could help them as well. And think about a contingency plan in case that dreaded TB affects you or them, how you're going to cope with that, and thinking forwards. Also, your dairy farms could be block calving all year round. When do you want calves? Do you want them from a spring block herd or an autumn block herd? When do you want that batch of calves? And do you want, maybe you need several sources, so you want some in the spring, some in the autumn, or you want them all year round, you're happy to take them from all year round herds. So think about how it's going to work with your system or what you're looking for. You're going to maybe think about the breed types, because if you know your end market, you know the breeds that you're going to want, those beef crosses that you want for the end market. Have you thought about that? And then have a conversation with the dairy farm, make sure they're going to use that breed, and maybe you're going to be sire specific. We want to shout about the sire, so we get that data. We want to know, and I know we need that for the beef industry, we want to know which sires are delivering the carcasses that you want for each market. So yeah, as much as you can be sire specific, because that will really help the industry going forwards. And sourcing, if you don't know any dairy farmers, then talk to your peers, talk to your vet, talk to your consultant, your people like Luppo. David and myself, we're seeing farmers all the time. We can point in the right direction of farms we know are doing a good job. So that's probably enough for you at the minute, but yeah, we can come back and talk about it a bit more later maybe, but that's where to start from, I'd say.
Becky, can I ask you, from a dairy point of view, what does a dairy farmer want from a beef farmer in order to sort of start business together?
So you need to understand what you want and when you want it and the price, and he really wants you to pick it up when you say you're going to pick them up, because if they get, depending on the age and with the TB situation, it can really affect them being shut down or being able to move those calves. So you need to say what you're going to do and do what you say you're going to do to build up that good relationship. It's a working relationship. It's it's a business relationship. It could be a friend, but this is a business agreement. And you may be friends. I'd still recommend you pop it in an email what you've agreed, so you've got something written down. Best case scenario, have a little contract drawn up, but if you've got an email stating what you're both agreeing to do, then if things go a bit wrong, you've got something to fall back on.
It was good advice that you shared about speaking to your peers in order to find a dairy farmer, or speaking to Luppo or one of us. Just out of curiosity, Johnny, how did you get in contact with the dairy farmer where you first bought calves from? Is that someone you already knew?
Yeah, we had a historical sort of relationship. When I used to buy calves, if I had a dead one or something to put on a cow, I always used to go to him. So yeah, there was that. And then this year I've just been ringing around, and calling people, and yeah, doing it that way.
Becky, I guess coming through soonish, the new dairy calf policy, there will be a surplus of calves, won't there? So there should be more available.
There will be. So yes, so the new strategy will be rearing all calves with care and eliminating the practice of euthanasia by 2023. Now, some milk contracts are already putting into place that you will not be allowed to euthanize your calves. So some people already be under that restriction. So there will be more calves available. That said, we're not going to be flooding the beef market because we've still got 25% capacity to fill. So why don't we fill it with British born and bred beef, and look after ourselves. I'm in the dairy sector, you're in the beef sector. Let's work together.
Good, thank you. Okay, so I'll just I'll see if any questions come in for you in a minute, Becky, but I'll just pop back to you, Johnny. So tell us about your current grazing platform again and how that operates. So maybe start from where we are now at this time of year, and what that looks like and how that's going to change over the next few months.
So it's all around agronet really. So I'm using a plate meter to measure grass. I input it into agronet, so I know what supply of grass I've got ahead of me with those number of cattle, and then it's just I use it's called a beef pack system from where I just reel out the poly wire basically and put out the poly wire, making sure that they're in no one area for more than 2 or 3 days, and then I just moving them along like that in one group, we'll say at the moment. And then if I find that we're getting short of grass, then I won't cut anything, and we'll just keep it. And then if it comes really dry, we tend to suffer with drought, and we'll put the cows or the young stock now into sort of residual grass until the rain comes.
I had a question actually for you about your turnips. So once your turnips are grazed during the winter, hang on, let me start that again. Do you get much surface water runoff issues from the stubble turnips once grazed during the winter? And if so, what will you do to prevent that in the future?
With the herbal leys this winter, I haven't had a problem with that, because moving the cattle daily, then they're never on one place for too long to poach it. So although I might need to scratch over a bit of seed, there hasn't been the risk. It doesn't get like that sloppy state where I've got runoff. With the stubble turnips, I was still moving them daily, so it never got to that stage. There were areas which did get poached if they were up against the hedge for the night, and what I'd probably do if I was going to do that again, I'd put a grass strip or something in alongside a stream or where there's a risk of runoff. Put a grass strip or something in alongside it, and you could even keep them away from that grass strip if you wanted to, just so that if there was any runoff, it would get held in that grass strip a little bit.
What do you think of that, Luppo? Is that sound advice?
Yeah, because it's important really to protect the soil as much as we can. So by moving cattle daily during the winter, we're protecting the soil. We're not allowing too much run back. And during the summer, it's basically protecting the regrowth because it's 2 or 3 days grazing. So when a new shoot comes up, that is not going to be grazed off, which tends to appear after about 3 or 4 days. So yeah, it's good management really.
And another question then for Johnny and Luppo. What does the winter grazing rotation consist of? Is that bale grazing on herbal leys, and how does that differ from the summer rotation?
So winter rotation is bale grazing on the herbal leys and maybe some permanent pasture. So we'll have this year we've had 7 round bales lined up, and they're eating 7 bales a day and having about an acre of grass a day. And then in the summer there's no bales and they get a bigger area basically, and 2 or 3 days instead of daily moves.
Great, thank you. Luppo, did you want to add anything to that?
No, the one thing that we set out to do as well, just the bales are put out in August, September when the ground's dry, so we don't actually have to drive across fields with tractors during the winter when it gets wet. So we're protecting the soil as well and field access. And all the places where the bales are placed, actually you wouldn't see any tractor marks at all. So there's no water running down any ruts as such. So yeah, that is very much a practice as well that you would have to do if you want to go bale grazing.
That's a handy tip. Johnny, your system isn't organic, but it's near enough is. What are your reasons behind farming in that way?
I just didn't see any point in putting fertilizer on anymore. Maybe I was a bit tight. Maybe I didn't want to spend the money on fertilizer. I thought I could manage with clovers, and I thought I could get more from managing the grass well. And yeah, so yeah, I didn't see too much benefit in using fertilizer basically. And
this isn't a recent idea. When did you think about this? It was a few years ago, wasn't it?
Well, I've been sort of soil focused. My whole thing has been sort of soil focused. So all the herbal leys, all the grazing systems have been to build soil organic matter, soil carbon, and spreading fertilizers and things aren't great for that, I don't think. So I suppose it stemmed from that.
And what did you think about that, Luppo, when Johnny said he didn't want to put any fertilizer on? Were you on board with that, or did you think, oh, maybe just throw a little bit on?
Don't lie, Luppo. He wasn't.
Initially, actually, as you probably know, if you looked at the slides properly, the kale in the turnips looks a bit anemic. I actually, when Johnny planted the turnips and kale, bearing in mind this is land that came out of cereals, I said, it's come out of cereals. It's already been, there's not much organic matter in this ground. There's not much inherent fertility after the wheat crop in the barley crop. You have to put on some fertilizer, but Johnny insisted, no, we leave it as it is. So, and I got used to Johnny, not wanting to go and spread fertilizer, but then again, it has to be replaced by something. So you have to replace the fertility by introducing clover into the system, which luckily the herbal leys were presenting us with that. And that's probably another reason why the herbal leys took so well, and the clovers took really well on the ground, because there was not a lot of residual fertilizer in the system. So they had a good chance of competing out the grasses, or not competing out, but definitely keeping up with the grasses as well. And we have a quite good clover cover now in those fields that have been reseeded out of cereals. And as time goes on, because it's we're still in the state of flux at the moment, just having got rid of suckler cows and buying in store cattle now, but the really the next 2 years will be really telling how robust and resilient the system will be. But I think it's going to be more robust than what it was before. So yeah, it's definitely going the right way.
So could I ask, is your soil organic matter increased then? Do you know how much it's increased by? And have you seen a difference?
Not yet, David. We've got several tests going on, but it's not a short-term process. It's a rather long-term process, building soil organic matter. And there's some, you get some discrepancies in tests, which can only be ironed out over time, I think. So we're only in year, we've had our second year, and we're going to the third year. And I think you really want to look at it over a 10-year, probably 10-year period, really.
Can I ask, Johnny, do you know what the pH across the farm is?
Yeah, we're a little bit acidic, I'd say, but around 6, pH is 6.
Okay.
Okay. So, Johnny, what's your current aim for the business and the system?
We want to we want to sort of ratchet up the kilos of beef per hectare because I think so the intensity of the grazing just keep having more stock basically, and I think the ground as we've gone along the process of this rotational grazing, we found that actually it's doing one hell of a lot of good for everything, and we're able to grow more grass, make better use of the grass, and have more cattle as a consequence of that. And I think if we do that, not only will the farm be more profitable, but I think we can really start having quite big environmental gains as well through putting a lot more carbon back in the soil basically.
Out of interest, what's your work-life balance like nowadays compared to back in 2017?
It's less. I spend less time with the farm, but probably more time doing other bits and pieces, which I got more free time, but I'm probably taking on other things other than farming stuff.
How much time do you think you're spending with the cattle daily?
So it takes me about an hour to move the cattle on the winter rotation, and then I go over, and I suppose it's like maybe half an hour at the moment. I go over and move the other bunch, maybe 3/4 of an hour, and then today there's a few hours just clearing away where the bales have been, picking up some plastic, that sort of stuff. So I reckon it's no more than like 2 or 3 hours a day if I was being truthful on average. But there's always something to go wrong, isn't there?
Don't say that. I've got a question from the audience. Have you done any soil organic matter testing? And if so, have you seen an increase yet? Although we have asked that question, haven't we? Do you want to mention about your involvement with Dutch Ecology's project, the Soil Carbon Project? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's one of the projects and that we started on 2 years, just over 2 years ago, I think. And they've taken, I don't know, 10 samples probably around the farm, looking at soil organic matters, worm counts. There's a few other sort of measures as well. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's it's good that we're measuring it, but I think it's a long-term thing to see any significant changes.
Do you know a bit more about that project as well, Luppo? Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting project because it's actually a 3-year project, which is thankfully funded through Cornwall Agritech, and it's quite it's probably the only place at the moment in Cornwall where we have a lot of money being spent on near farming research. And it's surprising really how much we are finding out about how capable that soil is of actually accumulating soil organic matter. And especially when you start doing carbon footprints in the grazing system, especially in Johnny's case, where we don't actually use not a lot of feed and not a lot of fuel really to feed our cattle. The total accumulation of carbon in the soils could actually offset Johnny's amount of methane and nitrous oxide emissions from the cattle in the soil. But like Johnny said, it's really, when you do soil organic matter readings, you need to do it every sort of 5 or 10 years. You don't do it from year to year because there's yearly variation in weather patterns and whatever. And also sampling as well within the field itself. It's very important as well knowing where your sample points are, because I've got some data on field, within fields that there's a large variation within fields on soil organic matter. So yeah, it's not an easy one, but as time goes on, the next 5 or 10 years, we'll find a lot more about soil carbon anyway.
I'm going to really put you on the spot now, Luppo, but do you know when any results are going to come out of that project?
There's been intermediate results out already on the project, but bearing in mind that it's a 3-year project, and like I said, year-to-year variation. And I wish actually that we could get some more funding, or some more funding for the same project on the same farms in about 5 years' time, because that really would show up, the real differences.
Yeah. David has conveniently disappeared when, oh, he's back, just in time. Got a few questions for you, David. So let's talk about the costing side of things then. So how simple is it to know if you're making a profit or not? If you're a farmer, you've got your system, perhaps it is sucklers, perhaps it's young stock, perhaps it's dairy, could be anything. Is it really easy to know if you're making a profit? Is it just looking at your bank balance and knowing there's money in there?
The answer to that question is bound to start with the word depends, because there's so many things it can depend on. A farmer's answer is usually, am I paying tax? And if you're paying tax, that's usually a good thing, or you've got a very bad accountant. But I would start where often start with people is they say, well, you have an accountant, you do your accounts, then start there. It's surprising how many people have accountants and they don't really use them to as a large extent as they should do. Yeah, use their expertise, ask questions from them, ask them where they think you're making, where your strengths and weaknesses are, because they're seeing a lot of figures for lots of farms. If you've got a farm accountant, look at your profit and loss statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement. And these can sometimes seem like a foreign language to many people. So use your own accountant to interpret and question again and keep on questioning. Some accounts that farmers get are very, very basic. They're just a whole farm. I would suggest that perhaps if you could get your accountant or consider having splitting farm management accounts up, so you've got all your enterprises set out, so you know how to allocate costs across the different enterprises you have on farm. Use existing farm records and management software. Obviously use software like we have in here on farm in Ahdb, such as Farm Bench or KPI Express, or maybe many farms use Farm Business Survey. I would also think about when you're thinking about profit, you also need to include take into consideration the fact that within profit has to come all the capital repayments for any capital projects you've done, any pension contributions, any taxes payable, as well as your own drawings. So you need to be aware of just what that profit means. But also you need to be sustainable year in, year out. So that's not just, you can make a good profit one year, but make a loss another year. Farming is very cyclical for all sorts of reasons. We all well know weather patterns and the impact that can have on us. So I'd like to start with lots of farmers is almost start at start at the end point and work backwards and ask yourself, how much profit do I need to make so what do I want? These are questions which we've been thinking about. You've alluded to with Johnny is yeah, what do you want out of life? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? And those are important things to consider. So once you've worked out how much profit you need, is work back and figure out how much income and how much profit you need to generate from those enterprises. So yes, it's not always an easy task, and when there is many enterprises on a farm, when we work with farmers, for instance, it's quite common that when we actually drill down and look at each individual enterprises farmers might have, there could well be 10, 12 or more separate enterprises if you divide out and look at the different grassland or stubble turnips as separate crops in their own right, any cereals they're growing on the farm to support. It might be that you're growing barley, for instance, to feed the stock, but still needs to be costed out. So when you're looking at all those things plus any stewardship, you might find out once you've done your costings that some of your enterprises are really strong and doing really well. And as Luppo said, when we first did Farm Bench with Johnny, he was it turns out that he was making a loss with his sucklers, but his beef we're doing okay, or we're going in the right direction. So until you have done those figures and try to work them through, you don't know where you are. So keeping a good control and knowing where you are is so very important.
I think, Johnny, it's quite brave that you spoke about the fact that you weren't making a profit or a big enough profit with the sucklers. From a farming point of view, do you think profit is talked about enough? Should we be having more conversations?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit crass to talk about profit, isn't it? But yeah, I think basically farmers focus on yields really, or what their cattle made in the market, but not necessarily what their costs have been and what the difference is. So I think that's maybe what farmers ought to look a bit more towards, is what these things are costing them, what these animals, they might affect top price in the market, but if they cost you more than that, then it's no good at all. But some of these things that are not top price but have made you the profit, and that's more important to me, and I think that should be the focus.
Becky, David, do you think this is a beef and lamb thing, or do you see this in dairy as well, that people aren't talking about profit?
It's across all sectors. No one has immunity from being frightened of figures. But I just implore people, make small steps. Don't be afraid, because there are people there to help you. People like David, people like your accountant, people like Luppo. We can all steer you in the right direction, and you really shouldn't be embarrassed or worried about it. Yeah, we all have to sort out our own we all have to do our own personal finances. It's just applying that scripture to your business to help yourself, really. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, yeah, that's so very true. Yes, it's not an easy subject, and I've often asked the question in farmer meetings when we could meet together. Remember that is why people go farming in the first place, and there's all sorts of things to replies come back, and things like, well, I just love living in the countryside, or I love raising stock, and I love the place where I live, and all those things are completely valid. And sometimes somebody eventually says, oh, and to make a profit. And I always say, well, all those things are completely plausible, and you should, we should be enjoying the things we do, absolutely, and love breeding stock and loving the place we live, but we still do need to make a profit. Obviously, there's quite a lot of concern now, and some of those questions that came back right at the beginning, looking at loss of BPS, for instance. Where are we going to be to going forward? We need to make sure we've made the right decisions or making the right changes if changes are needed, or to be aware that changes are needed, and that's the place to start, and what those changes might be and what they might look like.
That's really true, Luppo and David, and I'm sure there's people listening that are worried about losing their BPS over the years. We've got a really simple, if you want to start doing something really simple with numbers, we've got it sounds scary, a Brexit calculator, but you only have to put in, I think, about 6 numbers, and it will show you what the effect of losing BPS is. So you can start planning now, and we're all here, Ahdb, Luppo, all the independent consultants, your bank manager, your accountant, we're all here to help you work your way through that. And it's, thanks to Johnny for, highlighting an option he's made. It's not going to be for everyone, but that's one alternative, isn't it? If you find you're not making a profit, think what you could be doing.
David, I've got a question from the audience for you. If you had started a change to the system, how long before could you monitor the financial changes?
How long before did you say, or how long after?
It says how long before, but I guess either would apply.
Yes. I would say the answer is it's always important to keep on evaluating, make changes. Sometimes people make a lot of changes and then not quite figure out which are the changes that made the difference. So I would say continually evaluate, monitor those changes, and then see the results financially as well as physically, to see what those changes are. So I wouldn't say just do it once. You need to do it over and again, because as I said earlier, farming is cyclical. There are events, you have good years, bad years, so you need to see it in the round over a 5-year term maybe. But it's always good to plan ahead and make all those little tweaks to improve, because you're never going to be in that perfect space. It's always about learning. It's always a learning curve. It's always a journey of how to improve and where the next cost savings or next improvement in production in daily live weight gain, for instance, might be, generally how to go forward.
If there's someone out there that's watching us and they've maybe been inspired and they're considering changing their system or starting a new enterprise, what should they be considering? What questions should they be asking themselves?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Just making sure. I would say, first of all, I would ask the farmer to identify the system that they want to be going on. What are your objectives? What are you going to be focused on? Because there's so many different, particularly with beef, there's so many different systems. None of them are right or wrong, whether you want to go for intensive or extensive, but be consistent and know what you're looking for, what is suitable, what fits within your system, know where your strengths and weaknesses are. Johnny's identified the fact, for instance, that his land, he's able to do outwintering. I think we can all take you to farms in Cornwall and Devon and further afield, where to do that would be maybe not the best plan. But there are other opportunities that you can do, other strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes looking at the strengths and weaknesses of your own skill set and what you prefer to do. So how I would look at it is look at first of all how efficiently you can produce things. Looking at key performance indicators of your farm efficiency, whether that's suckler herd or beef or even sheep. We haven't discussed sheep tonight, but seeing what is suitable, maybe looking at daily live weight gain. Then once we've looked at the cost of production and got things as efficient as possible, you start drilling down into each cost, looking at grassland looking at, am I efficient at my grassland rotation? Do I rotate my grassland? Could I increase the grass by how I grow it, how I manage it? What about the effect of homegrown feeds, for instance, or bought-in feeds? Do I balance my rations? What are those costs? What's it costing me to feed them? What the vet med, for instance, is? Are you spending, or have you got high vet med costs because of prevention, or is it to do with control, vaccinations? Do I make best use of compensatory growth in the spring? All those questions we can ask. And then there's the fixed costs, the direct costs, which we can call them, looking at the best use of labour, time and efficiency. Am I doing things the most efficient way, cost-effective way? And then, of course, there's the question about machinery and what are those costs? What's the cost of me producing of grass silage or hay? What are those cost factors? Those machines, or are they contractors in? Are there ways to minimise costs on those? So those are the key things I would we often look at when we're looking at costings that come up time and time again. Trying to be labour and machinery are big ones, big costs. So I would look at them, and of course there's property and the depreciation on property as well. So there's quite a few things which you need to look at, but know your cost structure, knowing where you're going to go, where you want to get to. It's a bit like having, I often see, it's a bit like having a bucket of water. I often sort of envisage it like a bucket of water. As that's your income, and you keep on dipping bits out as all these costs keep on coming out, and you want to aim to have a percentage at the bottom for your own profit and own repayments. So oftentimes if you can aim for 15% of your profit at the end of the day, if that's what you need, or if it's more, depending on your output at the beginning. So there's an awful lot to take into consideration, but as Becky's already said, is go and get help out there. There's help and advice from Ahdb and from other sources, and go and get it and ask.
I think I would also bring in there, bearing in mind our first poll this evening, that we need our family and our team to be on side. So making sure everyone's pulling in the same direction. You've all agreed where you're going, and everyone's going to carry out protocols the same way. And maybe you're going to divide up responsibilities for different parts of the business, so that everyone knows what they're doing, and you can rely on each other. Yeah, and I think just going back to the cost things as well, it was interesting that Johnny said he was able to make use of the mid-tier scheme to help support him. But if you're going to make changes, they should really stack up without subsidies. That was a real bonus. But I think Johnny would have gone ahead anyway, even if that hadn't been available. Yeah,
I would have done, I think.
Yeah, that's a true test. That's what everyone should do, really, is whatever change you're going to make, it should stack up on its own. And if there's grants or subsidies available, happy days, but it should stack up on its own.
I've got a couple of other questions from the audience before we finish, but they're slightly unrelated. Was there anything else anyone wanted to add before I ask the questions?
I was just going to say, we haven't mentioned it, but weighing cattle has been one of the key things I've done, because I probably don't do it regularly enough, basically. But it's been my way of comparing one having those cattle out on turnips over the winter, how they did against the cattle I had on 2 kilos of cake a day. Just weighing cattle is absolutely key, I think, and has made my decision making a lot better, because I know what I'm dealing with.
Can't just look at them then, Johnny. Surely your eyes.
I know. Well, I'd like to think so, but I can't.
Nobody can. We've proved it time and time again in various meetings. You need to weigh them.
Very good answer. It was almost like we paid you to say that or something. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions here. So roughly how many kilograms of dry matter per hectare do you grow from both herbal leys and permanent pasture annually? Do you know that?
Yeah, I do. my permanent pasture is rubbish because I got a lot on. We've had 3 years measuring on Agronet on the permanent pasture. A lot of it's all under high level stewardship, so I won't have any fertilizer. We've had some dry years, and on some of the dry years, it might be like 4 or 5 tonne a hectare, Luppo. Correct me if I'm wrong. 3. And then the herbal leys have been a lot better, but I'm more like 7 or 8 tonnes a hectare probably. But you know, I think the herbal leys ought to be more like 10 tonnes of dry matter per hectare really. And I probably haven't pushed them hard enough or utilised them hard enough. But yeah, that's where they ought to be, I think. And with the permanent pasture, it's difficult because it's you know, it's like valley ground or under stewardship schemes. So you know, we're trying to. I think with the rotational grazing, we're actually, I think we're bringing more clover in, and clover's coming up through a bit more now. So we might find, you know, and particularly if we have a wet summer, it'll be a bit higher, but probably not that much higher than that.
And what vaccines do you use?
None. Rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, I think. But because I bought store cattle, I'd probably, if I was buying calves, I'd probably make sure they're vaccinated or vaccinate them. But I don't vaccinate at all any store cattle.
Becky, would it depend on what age the cattle are that you're buying in as to what vaccines you should or shouldn't be using?
Well, I think it depends on what your status is on your farm and how many different sources you're going to be buying your calves or cattle in from, because the more the increased number of sources raises your risk. And if you're going to be housing, and it depends on your stocking rate when you're housing and the ventilation when you're housing for your pneumonia risk. So it really is on a case-by-case basis. But talk to your vet, have a herd health plan, and he will be able to advise you, he or she will be able to advise you on the best protocol for your business and your setup. But as I said, you could, if you know that you're going to need them vaccinated and you're buying them in as calves, you can cut a deal with whoever's supplying them to make sure they're vaccinated before you buy, to save you a job. It's entirely up to you and your personal and business circumstances as to how you want to proceed. But I think, you know, this pandemic has taught us anything, biosecurity is key, and hopefully it's raised on everybody's agenda now as to how important it is.
Could Johnny, if he wanted to, could he influence the calf genetics of what he was buying in?
Absolutely, he could. If he knew what his end market was, and he knew, he could probably refine it to a couple of sires. And if he wanted to, he could offer to buy the straws to make sure that it was those straws that went into those cows, so we got the right crosses. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the relationship. Yes, they are. Yeah. Yep. Very detailed contracts are in existence. So it does future-proof your business because you know what you're going to get.
That might be your future, Johnny.
Yeah. No, I think it is. I think it is really. I just I thought I had something for next year, but TB scuppered that, and that's the danger. You can agree all these contracts forward, and then it gets scuppered with TB. But I suppose if you have a few of them, then you hope not all of them will be scuppered.
Yeah.
This leads on nicely to the next question. Actually, what happens to your business model if you go down with TB?
Yeah. So. We're annual testing in the autumn at the moment. So and then you know, any tracer tests I get, what will happen is that it will be the same process really. I'll get to the autumn, I'll decide what numbers I can outwinter. If I've got to sell some, then I'll sell in the TB restricted markets. I'll have to do that, and then everything else I'll keep hold of and look to finish. but it is a pain.
I'm going to have to start drawing things to a close. Were there any sort of final take-home messages that any of you wanted to share with the audience?
If I can start, actually, the one thing we needed to do with doing any changes is actually, do recording and measuring. As Johnny said, weighing cattle, that was part of the thing. Grassland measurement, and also, financial recording as well, which we did through Farm Bench, because without that, we wouldn't have made any of the changes.
You can't manage what you don't measure.
Yeah,
correct.
I'm afraid we're all going to say that. There's no easy way around it. It's not for everyone, and that maybe divvying up those jobs that makes it a little bit easier if you've got more than one of you in the team. So it's not just one person taking full responsibility, but you do need to measure everything.
And the other thing I would thank you for saying that, Becky. Yeah, backing up everything. I would say anyway. But I would say do your research and do your research. Keep on doing research. Ask questions. Go and see things when we're able to. Loads. This last few months has been loads of webinars on all sorts of different subjects. All there, and they'll be on the websites. Not just Ahdb's, but other websites for months. So go and search them out, have a listen to podcasts, and ask neighbours, look over the hedge and ask people's questions, and ask searching questions, and plus all the resources you can get online are just incredible. I just looking at our own Ahdb website today, and there are things there I'd forgotten were there. So yes, go and search them out. They're there. I know there's going to be some handouts after this, so some guides to get you in that direction.
Okay, thank you. And Johnny, was there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think I'd just probably say to everyone not to be put off of what some others might say. Don't be afraid to take some risks, and some of the time you might be wrong, but I think a lot of the time you're probably going to be right. And go for it. Talk to people that are doing it, actually doing it, and have done it, and listen to them. But those that haven't done it, listen to them, but just don't concentrate on those people that are doing it who have done it, and don't be afraid to take some risks.
Becky, you happy?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Johnny. Go and ask, go and visit people that are doing it. Hopefully we'll be doing some meetings and you come see what we're showing you as well.
Yes, hopefully very soon. I'm just going to present the resources that we've put together. Can you see that yet?
It's the first slide at the beginning of the meeting is showing.
Okay. Too many boxes in my way. Okay, is that any better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've picked out a few resources that might be beneficial to you as audience members. So we've got all of these are available on our website or can be directed from our website. So we've got farm business planning web pages, there's the Farm Bench tool, KPI Express tool, the Dairy Beef Production Systems Manual, the Buyer's Checklist for calves and store cattle. We've got the Better Returns for Calf Rearing Manual, GB Dairy Calf Strategy 2020-2023, and associated FAQs. There's of course the TB Hub, calf options web pages, calf rearing resources, and if you've joined the webinar tonight and you've received an email rather than watching this on YouTube in the future, you'll receive an email with all of these links on after the webinar's finished. And if you've had a really good time and you want to come and join us for some more webinars, we've got a few more coming up this month. And you can book on those the same way that you booked onto this evening. Again, they will be recorded and they will be put onto YouTube after the event. Lost my mouse. There it is. Okay. So, stop sharing my screen. Okay. So I think that's about it for this evening. So thank you to everyone that's joined us. Thank you very much, Johnny and Luppo and Becky and David, for giving up your evenings, and Johnny for sharing your story. That was really interesting. So also thanks to the audience for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.